7 years ago, Nicro would become the first ever person to beat Super Mario Odyssey in under an hour.
Let's go, dude! Yeah, let's go! You did it!
6 years would pass, and Nicro would do a lot during that time, but in August of 2025, he would post this video. With Bananza only being out for a month, Nicro was quick to claim that he had solved Bananza speedrunning, and rightfully so, as he discovered what might possibly be this game's most absurd exploit. New world records are happening every single day, if not every few hours, as various players from all around the world were fighting for the top spot during this time. Right before Nicro released this video, Rick held the world record with a time of 1:14:38, and Bananza's world record was already looking way too crazy. Bananza is one giant world that is connected by various layers, and in order to roll the credits, you need to progress through 17 layers before reaching the game's 18th and final layer, which is Planet Core. Even though Bananza had only been out for a few weeks, community members had already discovered crazy movement techniques alongside a plethora of skips. In addition to jumping, backflipping, rolling, climbing, and dive punching, DK can manipulate terrain in a variety of ways. If you press ZL with a piece of terrain in hand, you can do a turf surf, but if you trigger the turf surf animation after a jump, you'll get a large boost in speed and height. Twirly then discovered that you could do a technique known as the FAT, which stands for Fast Aerial Turf Surf. The FAT is essentially an improved surf cancel as you obtain a bit more speed and height from it. LimCube then expanded on the idea with the AFAT, or the Aerial Fast Air Turf Surf, which increases the height you'd otherwise get from the FAT. In addition to these three techniques, the Bananza transformations give DK abilities that are abused throughout the world record, with the Ostrich transformation leading to Bananza's first major skip. Upon entering the junction, you normally have to finish both the freezer and forest layers to progress, but if you abuse the ostrich's ability, you can glide all the way to the other side without finishing the freezer layer. The ostrich is then used to skip this race with the rhino in the racing layer, and overall, the ostrich is immensely useful to speedrunners. There's one more technique that I haven't talked about yet, and that is flutter stalling. Neil discovered that if you spam the punch and glide buttons, you can stall your time in the air, which allows speedrunners to cross otherwise uncrossable gaps, such as this one in Junction. Similar to the aforementioned techniques, flutter stalling is a prevalent part of the run. In the forest layer, it is used during the forest boss fight, and in resort layer, Rick flutter stalls to this watermelon without having to climb the flying islands. Outside of these skips, there are points in a run that are simply absurd. Now it's important to remember that there are 5 transformations you're supposed to collect in order to roll the credits, and this is the order in which you're supposed to collect them. The Kong transformation allows for you to smash through just about everything, so there isn't any reason to avoid this one. The Elephant transformation allows for you to further manipulate terrain, and since the elephant is so versatile, there isn't much reason to avoid this transformation as well. And as discussed earlier, the Ostrich is immensely useful to speedrunners. However, these 2 transformations tell a different story. Within close proximity to the game's release, speedrunners figured out that the Zebra transformation wasn't all too useful, so they were able to skip this one with ease. On the other hand, skipping the Snake transformation remained as a theory because it seemed impossible to cross this passage without it. That was until a player by the name of Zim did this.
You can always gold surface. Hey, here we go. 114. Oh, wow, it was a 3x. Holy shit, let's go. All right, GG's.
So there it is. Even though the game had only been out for a few weeks, Rick had lowered the world record to a time of 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 38 seconds. And with this world record came crazy movement techniques and 2 Bananza transformation skips. Now remember how I was talking about Nicro Vita? Nicro was simply messing around in Bananza when all of a sudden he saw another player by the name of Mui display a new technique that was known as the double A-Fat. If you cancel your turf surf on the upwards motion of an A-Fat and then go back into your turf surf, you can do another A-Fat, hence the double A-Fat. Once Nicro saw this, he began to wonder if it was possible to repeat the same sequence of inputs more than twice.
I have discovered flight and ruined Donkey Kong Bananza speedrunning forever.
And thus, the I-Fat was born. Infinite Fat was ludicrously difficult, but it was also a point of controversy since it was so incredibly broken. After some discussion, the community decided to split the leaderboard into two different categories: restricted, in which I-Fat was banned, and unrestricted, in which I-Fat was allowed. With this technique being discovered almost a year ago, there are only 4 people who have submitted an unrestricted run, which goes to show how ridiculous the I-Fat really is. A month would pass, and Ash would complete the first ever unrestricted run, clocking in at a time of 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 58 seconds. This run was severely unoptimized, especially if you consider the fact that it was 3.5 minutes worse than the restricted world record at the time, but nonetheless, it was a showcase of Bananza's untapped potential. Not only were there a plethora of mistakes, I-Fat was not explored much in this record, as the I-Fats done were mostly double A-Fats. But this does leave us with a question: how did the unrestricted world record drop another 7 minutes in the span of a month? Within less than 24 hours of the discovery of I-Fat, Ninpulk discovered a new method to clip out of bounds. This is done in Groove Layer to save a few minutes, and Ninpulk would go on to name this trick the chicken jockey skip. In the Feast layer, you could finish the layer off by fighting Muck, but Muck is a pain to fight because the fight is both time-consuming and random. Not only do you have to wait for him to melt the ground in order to throw salt at Muck, the salt itself randomly spreads across Muck's body. Using the elephant, you can save upwards of 30 seconds with a strategy that would go on to be coined as, Muck Tua. Okay, can we pause for a second? Who is in charge of naming these discoveries? Muck Tua starts by collecting salt with the elephant before entering the boss fight, which allows for you to avoid waiting for the ground to melt. Once this is done, you can hit the boss with the salt as opposed to throwing it, and if executed well, you can skip the rest of the fight by finishing him off in 15 seconds. Not only were players improving their execution, they now had Chicken Jockey Skip and Muck Tua, but there is one more skip that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is Mix Skip. While the world record was still held by Rick, it was now 7 minutes faster without the use of I-Fat. Rick still had lots of room for optimization, but this world record would be the first to last more than a few days. But after 2 weeks, another player would reclaim the world record with a new technique, and that player would be none other than Tyrone18. Tyrone has dominated the Super Mario Odyssey leaderboards for the last 7 years, so it's no surprise that he was able to obtain all of these world records in Bananza. Yet there was a problem with this world record in particular, and that problem was the technique that he used. In the months prior, Neil discovered that you could spam downward punches on King K. Rool to significantly speed up the fight. Since you encounter King K. Rool twice, this saves about 30 seconds, and the technique used would be coined as Dive Mash. In order to Dive Mash, you need to be able to press the B button 13 times per second. Although Dive Mash was initially discovered by complete accident on the King K. Rool fight, it turns out that this same technique can be used on every single boss fight in the game. But if we circle back to King K. Rool, mashing at 13 inputs per second will result in a 3-phase King K. Rool 1 and a 5-phase King King K. Rool 2, which cuts off one phase in King K. Rool 1 and 2 phases in King K. Rool 2, meaning that 3 phases are completely obsoleted through dive mash. If you are able to mash at 19 inputs per second, you can obsolete 2 more phases, but in Tyrone's world record, he pulls the 3-phase King K. Rool 1 and the 5-phase King K. Rool 2.
It's just as easy as that.
Fuck this game, chat.
Just mash a button crazy fast.
Since Dive Mash was like IFAT in the sense that it was another broken yet painful trick to pull off, it too became another point of controversy. Even though Dive Mash helped Tyrone obtain this world record, he himself was not a big fan of the technique, which is understandable because mashing this fast is a great way of getting carpal tunnel. A few months would pass, and in January of 2026, a vote was held by the community as to whether or not Dive Mash should be allowed in all categories, and it was one of the closest votes the community has ever seen, with 49% in favor of no and 51% in favor of yes. Dive Mash was now officially allowed in every category. Dive Mash may have turned some players away from the game, but for the rest of 2025, the world record in the restricted category saw steady improvements. But on December 7th of 2025, another unrestricted run was submitted to the leaderboard, clocking in at a time of 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 57 seconds. While this run also had its fair share of mistakes, the key difference between Vitox's world record and Ash's world record is that Vitox took great advantage of the IFAT. Not only was the IFAT used to speed up already existing skips, such as the watermelon skip in Resort Lair, it was also used to skip the ostrich transformation. Ostrichless had been theorized to be possible since Bananza's release, but since the ostrich was so useful, the idea of ostrichless was swept under the rug by most community members. In August of 2025, Mui discovered that an ostrichless route could be possible without the use of IFAT. If you use both the elephant transformation and the AFAT in conjunction with one another, you can do what is called the Elefat. If you perform an Elefat after an AFAT, you can double your height and distance. This technique allowed for players to cross gaps that would otherwise be used with the ostrich, whether it be this huge hole in the Radiance layer or these crevices in the Forbidden layer. Once it was discovered that these gaps could be crossed, a few route changes were made to make ostrichless a reality, but even with the route set in stone, the 40 seconds of time save was not worth it to most players considering how risky of a strategy it was. After 4 months, Vitox would be the first person to obtain a world record with ostrichless, getting a time of 104.09 in the restricted category, and this world record set by Vitox cut over a minute off of the previous world record. But if we circle back to Vitox's unrestricted world record, the Elefat becomes irrelevant if you replace it with the IFAT, meaning that ostrichless had potential to save even more time. Now, IFAT is a notoriously risky and difficult trick, which is why there are only 4 unrestricted runs on the leaderboard. So imagine how nerve-wracking it must be for Vitox to pull off over 100 IFATs in the final layer.
Let's go! That was the clutch of all time!
Let's fucking go!
Oh my god!
Let's go!
That service was crazy! Oh my god!
By the end of 2025, he had brought the world record down to a 102.35. By the end of the subsequent month, Vitox had brought the unrestricted world record all the way down to a 100.34. Sub-hour was on the horizon, but how did Vitox achieve this 100.34 in such a short amount of time? Part of these improvements stemmed from better execution across the run. Not only did Vitox have a stronger grasp on DK's movement, his IFATs and dive mash drastically improved. Vitox had also implemented another trick that saved around 30 seconds. Upon entering the Radiance layer, Vitox would climb this tower using IFATs. Once at the top, he activates a switch that allows you to descend into the Poppy boss fight. However, you can use a technique known as the roll punch clip to skip all of this. The roll punch clip was also discovered in August of 2025, with a player by the name of Ben being the first to use this clip to reach Poppy. Yet this clip was far from consistent when it was discovered because of a few factors. The timing of the roll and punch is precise, DK's position is never the same, and the size of the block changes from attempt to attempt. Since this trick was so inconsistent, Vitox would only go for it whenever he felt like it. By the time of his 10034, another player by the name of Stravos had discovered a consistent setup for Radiant's clip, and it seemed as though sub-hour was on the horizon. Yet Vitox was the only person who was even remotely capable of pulling off such a task, and the only problem with this is that Vitox was on a deadline.
Nicro, I think this is gonna be the last minute barrier I get, unfortunately. I don't know if you heard what I said earlier, but I'm quitting the game soon, so you might be able to come back and get sub-hour. Unless I like somehow get it, but I don't think I'm gonna get it. It's really hard.
Vitox only had 2 weeks to get sub-hour. If he was unable to break the barrier within those 2 weeks, then sub-hour could have very well been put on hold for a long time. This 10034 was achieved on the 9th day of his grind, meaning that he now had less than a week to shave off another 35 seconds. Vitox had successfully done all of the IFATs needed to make it to the King K. Rool fight, but it was unlikely that this was going to be the sub-hour, as Vitox needed the fastest possible King K. Rool fight to break the barrier. In other words, he needed to dive mash at 19 inputs per second to get a 4-phase King K. Rool.
God, yes! Let's go! Holy shit! Oh my god! You are so good! You are so good!
4 months later, and this is where the unrestricted world record stands, while the restricted world record stands at a 102.59. In less than a year, players were able to figure out how to beat Bananza in under an hour, and I have no doubt that more barriers will be shattered in the future.